Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us at the Phys Ed Summit 2017. My name is Sarah Gitchier-Hartman. I am a middle school physical educator in St. Louis, Missouri, and I'm a member of the Physedagogy and Phys Ed Summit teams. Tonight we are going into our second round of the physical educators' use of social media for professional development. So we just spoke to some educators about that topic, and now we're going to start talking to a new group of educators. Just a reminder that if we have any technical difficulties during this session, Collin and I will handle it, and we will update you through the TASL. And there's also a section in the TASL that has a link to Flipgrid, where you can leave some of your thoughts and reflections about the Phys Ed Summit in this session, and you can enter to win one of 2 yearly subscriptions to Flipgrid. So we're going to start off by having everybody in the group introduce themselves, and then Dr. Harvey is going to pose some questions for the group to answer.
So I'm Dr. Harvey. I kind of conned people into joining us for this session to have this discussion, but we feel it's going to be useful for the people who are emerging into the social media world about what are some of its benefits and challenges. I work currently at Ohio University, and I'm a former physical education teacher in the UK.
All right, I'll go next. My name is Seth Martin. I teach up in South Lake Tahoe, California. I teach K through 5 physical education, and I teach at Sierra House Elementary.
I'll go next. Hey, I'm Collin Brooks, and I'm a member of the Physedagogy team, as well as a board of director for Shape America, Phys Ed Summit team, and I am now a former physical educator and a PhD student at the University of Northern Colorado, and I'm happy to be here.
Mel?
We need to rehearse this better. Is it my turn? Okay, my name is Mel Hamada, and I'm an Australian, but currently I am living in Beijing in China, and I work at the International School of Beijing, which is such a mouthful, ISB, and I currently teach middle school PE and coach high school sports.
Dr. Carpenter?
University in North Carolina, currently sitting on my back porch. I'm a teacher educator there, and I do research on educators' use of social media.
Okay. So you ready to roll, Sarah, with the first question? So the first question we wanted to ask was, how did you first get into social media? And we're going to talk a little bit about Twitter, but also about Voxer, and we talked a little bit about Facebook as well on the other group. So anyone want to kick us off? Seth, Mel?
Sure, I'll throw it in there. So I had been very active in all the local conferences and things that have gone on in the state of California. There's more, and I was very happy with the group that I had in California to talk to, but I wanted to know if there's more out there. And randomly, I started using Pinterest because my wife was using Pinterest, and one of the things that kept coming up was Twitter. And so I created a profile and started finding some of the hashtags, and I was able to kind of wander into some of the chats, and then all of a sudden a door opened, and I started connecting with, some of the Physedagogy team. I think Naomi was one of the early people I ran into in there. And just as I started communicating with people, I realized there's a bigger world than what I knew. And then it just all snowballed from there, and, really completely changed the landscape of how I teach and kind of where I've gone with my teaching because of it.
So, for me, I guess my husband Clint is a technology facilitator at the schools that I work at. And he came back from a conference and all buzzing about this amazing person named Jared Robinson. And I was like, well, who's this guy? I don't know who that guy is. He encouraged me to reach out to Jared, and I did. And he ends up being the PE geek. And Jared is the most down-to-earth PE person you'll meet. And I met up with Jared, and he asked me to connect with him on Twitter, and we connected up. And it's, as Seth has just said, it just led to a snowballing. of meeting a whole bunch of people. And I think there was a very core PE group that began using Twitter, and then through awesome work and their dedication, they've sort of drawn in a huge crowd. And I think PE is very lucky to be on the forefront of social media use.
Collin or Sarah?
Sure, I can share. Kind of as I alluded to in the group before, so sorry for those that are hearing this again, but you know, I got started on social media back in February of 2014. My buddy Evan Godstiff introduced me at a conference, and I was reluctant, to say the least, to get on to social media. And for, you know, the reasons, the stereotypical reasons that you would think of when it comes to Twitter, right? To like really vain things like celebrities doing ridiculous things that I didn't care about seeing. But it just turned out that it really blew my mind. And once I was able to visually see the size of the network of physical educators and health educators and professionals that were willing to network with each other and share resources and professional development, it's really changed the course of my career, to be honest. And that's why I'm sitting here. It's probably why I got why I'm pursuing my PhD, a bunch of stuff, because of, I would say a lot of that is because of Twitter.
Mm-hmm. Sarah?
Yeah, so I'll, add a little bit more detail than last time. I guess the thing that Twitter's done for me is that it's accessible 24/7, and that when you ask a question, you're going to get a response, which is pretty great. Instead of just kind of like sitting around in your office at school and trying to figure something out yourself and flipping through all these books and everything, there's thousands of people out there, if you use the right hashtags, that are going to connect with you. And they're going to answer your questions, which is great.
Cool.
So I'm going to ask the next question. And we did have a question about describing your main reason for using social media professionally, but I think most of you actually kind of answered that in the previous question. So we're going to skip to the third question, which is, what do you do now on social media that you didn't do in your, say, early use of social media? So has your social media use changed over time with any particular tool, or has it changed where you've moved from one tool to another?
On this, I feel like one of the things that, like, early on, I felt like, part of every chat, anything that came up, that I had to constantly be involved. Otherwise, I'd end up disconnected or something like that. And what I've realized now over time is that you can self-pace it a little bit, and you can find ways to manage it within what is comfortable for you, rather than trying to be a part of everything. And I think that that's a huge thing, is keeping that balance and trying to also, initially I feel like anything, like I'd start throwing things out there, and I feel like I think a little bit more through each tweet and try to, really think about, how is this going to help anybody, or how is this, something that, if other people see it, might inspire, what question do I think there's people out there to help? And I also believe that because I've been a part of it now for a while, I can also tag certain people and I feel like that at first I was just hoping somebody would help me out and just throwing it out to the world, and really, wondering, okay, am I going to get any kind of answer? And sometimes I did, sometimes I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah?
I think that I've definitely become more reflective as a teacher, because I'll hear about something that's been done, or I'll hear about a new teaching method or a strategy, and I'll kind of relate that to my own practice, and then I'll contact the people that I've seen using those things and ask them lots of clarifying questions just to dig a little bit deeper. And I don't think that I necessarily always did at the beginning of using Twitter. And I definitely didn't do that prior to being on social media at all, because I didn't necessarily know what was out there, and I didn't have the means to have those conversations. So it's definitely made me mature as a teacher as well. If you look at my tweets from 4 years ago, which wasn't that long ago, I sound completely different. And the questions that I ask are sometimes embarrassing to read. So you might not want to do a Twitter advanced search and do your past like I've done, but
it's not as bad as what Scaramucci had to delete, so you're fine.
It's true. I haven't had to do that. I don't have any demons in my, digital footprint, but I've definitely matured as an educator.
Yeah, I guess I could echo that a little bit in the sense that I feel that I have grown as an educator too. And I feel that Twitter and social media in general has challenged me to become a better professional and a better leader, because I guess I grow, I believe, by being involved, and I know that a lot of people are looking and at the work that I guess I'm doing, and I want it to, I want it to be good work because, number one, for my students, and for number two, that there's a lot of people looking at it. And I think that combination really makes you focus and make sure whatever you're putting out there and whatever you're doing for your students is a really good learning outcome for them, or whatever it is that you're working on for them.
Mel, so what do you know now about social media that you didn't when you first joined?
Oh, she's frozen. No? Yes.
Me, I am here. I'm just having some problems with
That's okay.
connecting.
Sorry to think you were frozen.
No, that's okay. I'm trying to stay here. For me, I think my social media life has changed. In the beginning, I feel like if you think about it from a Bloom's taxonomy kind of thing, I was just watching and listening and not really sharing anything. And then as I felt more confident and comfortable in the space, and as I felt like I got to know people, that there were certain people that I felt I'd either met them on other media platforms, or I met them in person at a conference, or I'd had an email exchange that sort of deepened a relationship with different people. I felt then that I felt more connected to people and felt that I could share ideas and get valuable input or conversation around those ideas, without feeling like I was going to get trolled or shut down. And just sort of discovered that the PE community is very supportive. I think over the last few years, though, probably the last 18 months, I felt that the community in some good and bad ways has really got huge. There's a lot more people out there. And within the journey of being on social media, there's still people that are still in the voyeurism. They're still watching and listening stage. And there's the people who are just flooding content on there, and the content has people will say, look at this game, is awesome. And but I feel like I've reached a point in my teaching where I'm ready to be more critical or self-critical or critical of some of the stuff that's coming out. And I feel more confident now that I've been in this forum for a lot longer. Question people's motives or question why they're sharing content. And I would also say I've reached a point where I'm not on Twitter as much as I used to be. Community that I really trust, and I'm not sort of recruiting any more people into that group. I have my go-to people that I just adore and love, which may be detrimental to me because I'm not collecting any more new ideas or being more open-minded about that, and that's something I've had to reflect on. But there's, I think there's real hierarchy of how you use Twitter, and it evolves with time and confidence.
Real quick, it just made me think of something from the beginning of when you were on Twitter to now, I would say that our desire or our ability to reach out to other people has kind of slowed down. I mean, to a certain extent, like you find your network, you make good friends. I believe that mine's still expanding, but it's expanding at a great and a slower rate. So that's, Mel, that definitely made me think of that that's something to consider, that we get comfortable with what we have in any kind of circumstance.
Thanks,
and
John.
I think one thing to think about now is that in like the Twitter world especially, and Voxer, using those that eventually I do hope and plan on having a real relationship, a personal relationship with, where you actually meet them and hang out with them and all of that. And I think that fortunately for me, over time, that's occurred. And I think that changes even how you speak and approach to people and respond to them. You can kind of like jump in and maybe be what might appear to be judgmental or even, you know, short with your answers with people. And then when you really think about it, like these are still people that you have real relationships with and can have real relationships with. I think you approach your responses and your conversations with others a little differently. I think that's definitely been a change. And I think it probably connects to Sarah talking about how she's matured with it. I think that's how I've matured with it, is really thinking through how I'm speaking to people, because eventually person, and I don't want it to be, you know, working through that feeling bunch that you might get if you believe you're being judged, or if you believe you're, you know, you somehow were on different sides of the fence.
I mean, good point. How is that different with Voxer? You know, because you've got the vocal component rather than the, you know, the sort of the visual, just reading through. You know, so is some of that the thoughts you were describing different with Voxer or for other people?
I think definitely. I mean, Voxer, you actually hear somebody's tone, read into people's tone, and so you can kind of hear how they're speaking a little bit. I think of a conversation that, you know, on Twitter seemed heated, that then continued into Voxer, and everyone was a lot more calm, it seemed like, with their responses, because you could hear people's tone and you could hear their emotion, and you could tell that there was no malintent. Whereas sometimes people, like they talk about, you'll read a text with your own lens on how it's being said. You know, you read text, you know, how you want to read it. So if you've perceived conflict or you've perceived judgment, you're going to read it with that tone. Whereas in Voxer, you hear the person's tone and you can hear, you know, so I think it does change that piece to it, because there's not interpreting as people's voice, you know, it's what they're saying, and you can hear how they're saying it.
Yeah, Seth, I totally agree. Like, they get to hear your tone, they get to hear, you know, what you actually sound like as a person. But at the same time, it's not really an authentic way to communicate, because it's one at a time. And for those people that really know me, which a lot of you in this room really, really know me, I talk super fast, and you're going back and forth when you're face to face with somebody, and they interject and the topic changes, and then you go back to that topic, and then you come back to another topic. And in Voxer, you kind of ramble for like 3 minutes. And a lot of people even say like, oh, I'm so sorry, I've been talking for a really long time, and I'm sorry that I'm doing that. But then what you're doing is continuing to ramble. Like, we're all guilty of that. And so while you do have another personal side to it, it's still not 100% authentic. I guess the good thing is that is typically the people that you're talking to in those situations are the people who you already have developed a relationship with. And so they're able to kind of see past all of that. But I mean, you have times when people go, hold on, let me re-listen to that, because you said 5 things and I don't remember the first 2. That doesn't happen to me when I talk to people in person. Like, I don't have to go like, hold on a second, let me think about those last 5 minutes. Like, the conversation flows much easier in real life.
I think that it does flow really a lot easier in life, but it is, Voxer kind of reminds me of like those team building activities you have where like, or like certain like, when you're in a professional development opportunity and everyone's like, okay, give the person 1 minute to speak and then you have a minute to speak, or give the person. So in some senses, although like what Sarah was saying, that is a con, I also think it gives you an opportunity to speak uninterrupted, which in social situations you get interrupted and you lose your train of thought. But if you ramble on and on and on, then it kind of doesn't help anyone. But I think that could be a pro of it.
But we talked about this in the last group where, you know, how much time do we actually spend thinking about what we're going to say before we say it? And how much time do we think about what we're going to post? So what are people's, is that something that's changed over time for the group here in the room? Or has that been the same ever since you got on Twitter and Voxer?
I think that I take a lot of time to compose tweets, to make sure that my thought is articulated well, especially if I'm asking a specific question and I want to receive specific types of answers, or even just the thought process of making sure it fits and that you're using the correct hashtag and, you know, that kind of thing. I think in Voxer, I don't think about what I'm going to say at all, because I'm talking to friends. So it just kind of comes out. But because you do have that delay in when you're going to send your next Vox, it does give you the opportunity to think about your response, not necessarily how you're going to phrase it, but what the heck you're actually going to say.
Mel?
I would say that I used to use something called Hootsuite, where I would set up tweets if I wanted specific information. I found that if I set them up in advance, that they'd run on a time, and I could send them out. For me, it was like 2 in the morning or 4 in the morning, but it was when my US network was waking up, so that I could make sure I hit them early in the morning, because everyone gets very busy during the day and I wouldn't hear back from people. So that was a bit strategic. I find on Voxer that, especially Sarah has recently thrown me some amazing questions, and I've had to go away and come back.
That's because I expect you to know the answers.
I know.
That's why.
I'm like, oh my God, I've just started teaching. I'm still in summer mode. Anyway, I think it depends on who's asking the question. So there are some chats on Voxer, like Justin Schneider has one about his slow blog chat, and that's just an ongoing chat that I sort of jump in and out of depending on the blog that he's written for that week. And if it's something that I feel really passionate about, or that I feel I can share with other people from my experience, then I will think about what's happening. But it depends on the questions that he's asking. Whereas I think if you're doing a personal chat, like the chats I've had with a lot of you guys one-to-one, it's posing questions either about something conceptual based or learning based that requires some thought and reflection, or it's sort of a bit of a banter, how's it going, what's happening, and sort of checking in on the network to make sure everyone is in a positive space. So it depends on where your conversation is at. But I would say for me, I've jumped off Twitter a little bit because I feel like the questions that I'm asking at the moment are maybe a little bit more in depth or a bit more personalized to my experience. And so I'm targeting the people who I feel might have a like-minded approach or a very different approach to me, because I know their circumstance better now. And so I'm targeting my questions more carefully.
So building on that, how do you build relationships on social media? I put this question on the Tozzle a couple of minutes before, so there's some interesting things talking about gaining professional acquaintances but not really friends. So how do you build those relationships? And then Dr. Carpenter's just put something on a Tozzle about authenticity. How do you really find the people that are truly authentic? So tell me a little bit about that.
I can start. So I don't know if you can describe how, because it sounds interesting, but when you go to school as a student for the first time and you wonder who's going to be your friend, you don't know. It just, over time it happens, and that's the last thing that you would expect to happen on something like Twitter. But that would describe my experience. I mean, it just kind of organically happened. So I guess the more that I engaged others, and then from that engagement came collaboration. Once that collaboration happened, that's kind of when we took the conversation off of Twitter and put it on Voxer. So I guess in smaller groups. And when you can have those conversations a little bit more depth, I think that's when those friendships started to form. And I'll use Phys Pedagogy as a great example of that. As to be quite honest, our friendships are the thing that I value the most out of everything that we've been able to do. And the trust that we have as colleagues and the things that we can share. So I think it's truly could be compared to like an organic thing that you would just experience as a child going to school or something like that.
Anybody else?
Well, I mean, I think it's funny. I think it's one of those things that in conversation pieces, I think that starts the ball rolling. It's when you even start talking to somebody who all of a sudden you have side messages and side, if it's Voxer, side boxes, and you start having those one-on-one conversations or even small group conversations, you start to build that relationship. You start to learn more about the person. I think you start learning who you want to pursue those conversations even with, just based on, what you're reading. You're like, okay, that person I really like where their mind's at and where they're thinking, and I like how they go this way when I don't think about going this way. I really need to know more about that, concrete it in enough to get the chance to actually hang out with them. You really get to learn one-on-one. And I think it's funny because we're talking about social media, but I feel like that bond truly happens when you get to see each other. And for some of us, I know that's not possible. We live distances away and, you know, it just can't be done, but you figure out a way. I mean, Sarah and I, the first time we met was in a hangout on Twitter. For quite a while, we started doing hangouts, and that was even a chance of a face-to-face meeting. But, you know, you start pursuing these deeper connections with people, and I think it just kind of organically happens a little bit with shared interest, or somebody really piques your thought process, and it's like, I got to know what this person is thinking, and I have to figure out how to. I think that's been my kind of journey with it.
I would agree, Seth. I think there's such a process in this. Like, I feel for me, because I live in Asia and I lived in Australia, so, and all of the people that I connect with, there's a whole bunch in the Asian region, but for you guys in the US, it was really important for me to come to SHAPE conference and meet all of you, because you've been all such a big influence on my growth as an educator. And I knew that I would have to come at some point and meet all of you in person, because it sort of made those relationships that I'd already formed so important. And although it was very exciting to present at the SHAPE at Boston in March, the most exciting thing for me was hugging all of you, because it sort of really added that 3D dimension. It's not just on computers. And that was so important. And I think for me, the opportunity to go and meet people at conferences has become the highlight of my professional year. It's not necessarily the content that I'm now going to see or to share, although that is exciting. It is much more exciting to go and add that personal high five coffee with the people that I have been connecting with for a very long time online.
So what makes you all decide to follow or unfollow someone on Twitter and or join or leave a group on Voxer?
For me, I'll speak to the Voxer thing, because this is one I feel very strongly about. So I tried the Voxer groups, and I talked about this in the group 1 chat a little bit, but I'll expand upon it. And it was too rapid fire. For example, if I asked a question at 8 o'clock in the morning, and then I went and taught 2 classes, and then went back and tried to check it on my planning period, because of how many people were in that group, there could have been, 50 responses, but 2 of them could have been for me, and the other ones could have been some other conversation. And it was just too hard to keep up with those conversations. And so I said, I can't do this anymore. It's taking up too much time. I'm not gaining that much from it. I can't do it anymore. For Twitter, I have a lot more followers than actual people that I follow. And I think that's kind of happened over time. At first, when I joined, I was like, oh, I follow you, you follow me. I have to reciprocate that. And now I don't feel the need to necessarily do that. And I edit my lists. I'm always looking for really innovative ideas. I'm looking for people who teach with a purpose. I'll see something, and depending on what they bring to the table, I just add them. So.
I guess for me, I don't know if I've ever unfollowed someone on Twitter. I just feel bad. Maybe I have, but the thing is, it's really easy for me to leave a Voxer group, and to me, Voxer can be detrimental, and it's a great tool. And I think that for me, the purpose of it is to develop better relationships with my colleagues and collaborate. And with 150 people in a group, there's no way that's happening. That's taken away from my ability to teach, in my opinion. So those are chats that are easy for me to leave, or you can mute them, which is maybe another option. If you feel guilty about that, you just mute the group, and then you don't have to worry about that. But yeah, I guess for me too, at Twitter, I think if I was to follow everybody, then it would be very difficult to be able to select the things and personalize what I needed to do to grow as a professional.
Yeah, I would say for me on Twitter, if you don't have a profile photo and if you're not dedicated to something that's within the realm of educational thinking, I really only use Twitter for professional growth and connecting. I don't use it to put, I'm not telling you what I'm eating for breakfast or whatever. And so I think it's made me do a lot of reflecting in the last year since there's been some presidential change in the US about whether I should be broadening the thought scope of people in my PLN so that I'm not going along happily, not challenging maybe what my thinking is anymore. I sort of feel like I've come to a point where I'm very, very comfortable with what I'm teaching and feeling confident that I'm trialing some of the best pedagogical practice that's out there through conversations with a lot of you. But maybe there are people out there that would really spin my thinking on its head if I collected more people from my PLN who think really differently to me. But that's one of the reasons I joined social media in the first place, was that the colleagues I had in my department, although very thoughtful and knowledgeable sports people, were not interested in looking at game sense or concept-based learning, which is where I felt PE was headed, and I was really passionate about that. And so I had to go and collect more people to sort of really tap into that thinking. And that's what I've done. And I'm in a very happy place. But I will say I agree with Sarah and Collin about Voxer. I think it can be very life draining to discover that there's 20 different messages that everyone's left for 3 minutes. And I'm like, oh gosh, do I just ignore the people I don't know? And do I just jump onto the people I do know? I do love the fact that you can speed up the voice. So everyone, you will sound awesome at 3 times your normal speed, I have to tell you. Because that's the only way I can get through some of the conversation that I really want to be involved in. But I do find the one-to-one Voxer chats really awesome for making me think harder about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it.
Yeah, that seemed to be something that the last group, particularly Evan, talked about. It was very well, and Collin in this group, that they found very valuable, where they call it side voxing, I guess. But when you can come out of the main group and someone said something and you feel like you've built a connection, or you've got some philosophical alignment, you can get on a conversation. It's just nice to hear. Like you send me messages, and it's just nice you're always very polite and ask me how I'm doing, and it makes me feel good about myself. So it's, I think that's good, but it's a private space, and you can direct message people on Twitter, I know, but it's nice to hear, that you've got that support.
I also Harvey, that I am 12 hours ahead of you guys. Like, it's Sunday morning. Woohoo! I've just got up. I'm on coffee alert. It's morning. My kids are up. We're all in our pajamas, except I've put my shirt on over my pajamas. But the time difference makes a huge problem for me. It's not easy for me to Google Hangout with you guys or to tweet with you, because by the time that I'm getting my morning rolling, you guys are all getting, having hopefully time with your amazing families and going to bed. So Voxer and Twitter does allow for me to get ahead of things when the time zone is so weird for everyone, and ensure that I can still touch base with people at a time that works for both.
Yeah.
So what do you all see as some of the challenges in using social media? We have mentioned some of them, so maybe things that we have not already talked about. And then particularly if you see those challenges being different.
I think one of the challenges can be that we can end up finding a comfortable group that all agrees with each other and doesn't challenge each other. And that seems like a great thing, but really then that's where the growth stops. And I think it's very easy to find that comfortable group. The wild cards that pop up in Voxer or Twitter, like out of nowhere, really get you going, whoa, wait a minute. Why do you think that way? And when you start digging into their thinking, that's the next step in growth, is you start seeing their perspective on it, and you start looking at your perspective, and now you're questioning yourself, you're questioning your practices. Whereas, and you probably hold some things at the same value, or you have similar values, you have things that you had in common. And I think it happens a lot with even some of the conversations about what you should and shouldn't do, how you're approaching things. All of those pieces, it's not necessarily a bad thing to have challenges to those. When you're in social media for long enough, sometimes you get very comfortable with certain people, and you miss some of those people who might, create a challenge, or, just change up the thinking a little bit. And whether or not in the end, you lean to their side or not, of your thoughts really then helps you grow, and even helps you think about, okay, if someone were to ask me this enough, or, if we were talking about grading, if a parent asked me something about, it's like, what would my response be? And listening to other people, you just start thinking of those scenarios and thinking about those things, and then trying to get your wheels turning and find a solution or find the next steps.
For me, the challenges are time zone is challenging, to try and grab a hold of people in real time and form relationships that are on the right time when we're all able to have that chat. I find it's challenging to connect with people to take things to a little bit more depth. So if you're talking to people on Twitter, you've only got 140 characters, you can be misstrued or misunderstood, as we've said before. I also feel like it's overwhelming sometimes. And part of the Physiology blogging series about teacher burnout, I have felt that being at this point in social media has been a burnout for me. And I have made sure each summer that I'm not online, because I really feel my brain is a bit scattered. I'll come, I've got half an hour to prepare something before my next lesson. I sit down and suddenly there's all these tweets and all this Voxer stuff, and I feel like I should be instantly replying to people, which is a mistake. And I know that in myself, but I feel like people are waiting for me, and I feel obligated. And I don't mean that in a negative way. If you're communicating with me, please don't feel bad. I just feel sometimes it can be overwhelming to have a lot of things going on when we're all working full time and we're all have families. I also think it's challenging when you're trying to teach across different curriculums. Like, I really realized when I went to SHAPE that you guys have such an amazing state level of this and district level of that, and I don't have any of that here. I don't have any of that level of support or engagement with people about curriculum and pedagogical practice. I'm relying on what's happening in my department, at my school, and then on social media, because we don't have that same real connectivity that you guys have. And so that has also been challenging for me to wrap my head around how you guys operate compared to how I'm operating, because often I think what I'm looking for or asking for can be misconstrued by people who are a completely different professional setting. And so that's also something to be mindful of.
So piggybacking off that, what can you and can't you say on Twitter and or in Voxer groups?
Yeah, I think it depends. Like, Twitter is a little bit more, it needs to be a professional place if that's the way in which you're going to use the tool. However, you can joke around a little bit more than you would, say, a professional email, but there's GIFs. You can send GIFs or make people laugh and that kind of stuff, whereas you wouldn't do that in an email. But you do have to really conduct it the same way that you would with an email to your principal, in the sense that you have to think about it. However, if I were to write someone a direct message, I wouldn't think very long about that message if it was to my friend. Or if I'm on Voxer in a group of phys-pedagogy, I'm not going to think about it. I'm going to speak immediately. But if I'm in a group with 50 other individuals, I'm probably going to spend some more time thinking about it, because these individuals don't know me as well, and I want to make sure that I come across as professional and don't want to say anything that offends anybody.
Have you had situations where you found people have made Freudian slips that you've observed? If it's no, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's open to the rest of the group as well.
Freudian slips.
Well, just when you post something and then, not just because you've mistyped it, but because it's come out and then people have deleted things or taken things down.
Maybe that's what that recall button's for on Voxer.
Well, and I think a lot of people pay for Pro on Voxer so they can use the recall. I use it because my kids get in the conversation, so I want to, that I'm just about to start talking and my child will scream at me, so I have to press recall button. But any other thoughts?
I would agree with Colin. I think Twitter is such a huge Twitter sphere. There's so many people that are potentially viewing or looking at what you've got out there, and because I'm using Twitter as a professional voice, I want to make sure that my professional voice remains professional and is not. I don't want people to misconstrue or misunderstand something. Although I feel at the moment I'm at a place where I will hopefully constructively engage people in conversation to understand what makes them say what they're thinking or why they've posted some of the stuff they have. If I feel like, I think the word polluted is a really strong word, but I think sometimes the phys ed hashtag can be polluted by things that maybe not all of us support. And I feel like I've been in that phys ed hashtag long enough to be able to sort of say, well, what are you doing? Why are you putting that up there? Do you need, can we help you with something, or are you just self-promoting? Because I think some people do use it as a commercial tool to sell their product or their whatever it is they want people to comment on, which I have a bit of a problem with sometimes. But I feel in Voxer I can be groups or the people that I'm chatting with, and so I feel much more confident to speak my mind and be the professional who might else be reading or watching or thinking about this, because that could be a potential employer or someone who's else that I want to go to, or there's more influence on that.
Yeah, I think with sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Seth.
I think with Twitter, I think we're all at the point, or at least we're getting to the point where we understand that most school districts have a Twitter now. Most educational systems have a Twitter. So you got to think through. I usually, when I'm trying to tweet about things, I'm trying to really look at the positives, and I'm not ever complaining about anything going on in my district or complaining about things, because I don't think it is beneficial in any way, and I don't think starting those kind of conversations gets anyone excited, and so I kind of avoid those kind of topics. Whereas I know that when people have stuff going on in their state and it's a political thing and it's something that's a different story, but I believe that what you're talking about and really trying to be positive about your profession, especially on Twitter, is just kind of one of those things that you do. In Voxer, you can be a little bit more real. So just basically trying to approach things as positively as you can.
I think that one of the biggest challenges for me right now, and I'm going to just throw this out there because I know a lot of people in Tassel right now agree, is I have a really tough time reading the comments that are on the PE Central Facebook page. And I'm talking about the initial conversation. And I've gone through the roller coaster of, oh, well, just don't be a member of the group anymore. I did that. And then several friends would tag me and say, Sarah has this incredibly valuable resource that needs to be shared. Well, guess what? The only way to share it is to be a member of the group. So I've tried that. I've tried ignoring the thread. Then the other thought is, well, I need to be a member of this group because I need to be in tune with what's going on in the physical education community, whether or not I engage in those conversations, I answer those questions or whatnot. I guess I just don't see the questions that are asked on that page being asked on Twitter. And I guess, Collin, maybe you can help me out because I see you nodding your head. So I know you're agreeing. I'm having trouble describing it. But the questions where these teachers are just asking things that shouldn't be asked anymore. They aren't asking questions that are pushing my thinking. It's always at the opposite end of the spectrum. And the responses that the teachers are getting are people who are writing back saying, well, have you tried this instead? Have you tried this instead? And these are the, the best practices, the new practices, the wise practices, whatever you want to call them. I'm not getting people who are sharing the best practices and then having this really awesome conversation about those things.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that the Facebook page on PE Central is a good example of maybe what is going on in the greater physical education world. Twitter is a good example of what's going on in maybe 5% of people that are, to just be honest, looking to push it really forward for the most part. So I think that one thing that we need to do as practitioners better is do what Sarah's trying to do. But Sarah shouldn't be the only voice on there. I mean, when you create something great, you need to then help others and create it. And that would be really interesting to spend some time on that Facebook page and see the conversations in there. And like Sarah said, there is a huge differences. There's a lot of not best practices that are going on that page. And there are some people that are reaching out to those individuals. But I can give those people credit because they're trying to find a way to get better, for sure. And that's a fantastic thing. And I don't know where to go from there with that group. It's really an interesting, it's such a contrast to what's going on with us and in this conversation.
But what it goes back to is what we were discussing, I think, in the first group, which is because there is no personal relationship established, when some of the people from our Twitter community that I recognize or already know personally are getting on and challenging the things that those people are saying, it is always taken in a very, what's the word I'm looking for, defensive way. Or I don't even know why I'm a member of this group anymore if all people are going to do is bash me, or I'm leaving this group, or I'm blocking you, and because there's no personal relationship. And for me, I'm saying that to challenge because I'm incredibly frustrated by it on a daily basis.
See, and I think with that though, and because I read through the things on that strand, and there's names I recognize starting conversations as well. And then there's, some of the conversations that you're definitely mentioning. And I think what we need to think about is, with all these goals, like the 50 million strong, all these things, is why are these people in that place? Like, why are they in that place where they're not even aware of what's considered the national best practices? Why are they, struggling with that? And then, looking at what their situation is. Are they basically learning from the person who was there before them, who didn't have any connections and didn't, it's a whole chain of learning, and their pool might be extremely small. And so they basically have only learned from the person before them, and everyone's happy. I had one of my first schools, they just told me that the teacher basically did calisthenics for 20 minutes. And then that was the end of PE. And this was elementary level. And that was what they did. And they're like, everybody's happy. And it was one of those things where it was like, that's not what I'm going to do. That's not really teaching anything. That's just keeping them busy. And but it was a process. And it was, it's one of those things that, how can we help those people get there? And I think if the voices keep going, and then there's some voices that are definitely very active within our Twitter group and stuff that keep challenging those things, I think just over time, and hopefully we start getting, we go, well, wow, maybe I am thinking the wrong way about this, and maybe I have to rethink it. I've seen Joe now pushing that. Mike has been doing it a lot, Ginicola, and I think over time, hopefully we can turn that group in a positive way.
So we've got one more question that we'd like to shift to while we still have a little bit of time. If you could speak to how your professional learning via Twitter, Vox, or social media in general is similar or different to the professional learning you experience in other contexts. So maybe the professional development provided by your school or district, or face-to-face professional learning experiences.
I guess I'll answer this question. I'm not really a millennial, but maybe I'll answer it like a millennial because I'm like maybe right on the edge of that. And I think I like that sometimes. So first of all, I think millennials get tired of being told what to do. When you go to a district training, not just millennials, but you don't have any say or any choice. And I think that, however, those trainings can be good and beneficial when you feel like you can choose, you have ownership. And I feel as if social media, Voxer, and Twitter is giving us ownership of our professional development and causing us to go out and seek it and find what we need. So, and you know, there's a word of caution with that. We always like the echo room. You don't want it to be like the echo room, but you can personalize, as I was saying in the last hour, your experience, which is really valuable.
Maybe have one more comment and then we'll have to get it locked down. So anyone else? Mel or Seth?
I think for me, working at an international school, which is a standalone school, we tend to have our PE faculty, of course, and everyone has different opinions and whatever, but you can't always meet with them in a timely way to get the things that you're after, or people aren't as knowledgeable, or they're on the beginning of their learning journey as PE teachers. And I feel for me it's been really important to connect with other educators who've had more experience or researchers who are on the forefront of testing out different pedagogical practice, so that I can engage in those conversations with people and hopefully better the experiences for my student learners. I think also schools are like mine, which are very standalone, although they connect up with other schools, there's not always a lot of time to engage in things like PE. PE isn't always important, the most important thing, whereas it is to me. PE and good practice is important to me. And so we might be able to bring in a professional to help us. Like we've booked a professional to come in November, but for those people in my department who will not go to a conference and will not have any PE specific professional development until November, if they're not seeking their own learning, that's a really long time to be whirligigging around in your own space and not receiving the information that you might want in that moment. So for me, it's been awesomely important to stretch my thinking and to engage in some really great conversations and build my confidence as a teacher of my students.
Are we going to close, Sarah?
I was waiting for you to say something.
Are we going to close it up?
Yes.
We probably need to.
Yes. So I would just like to thank everybody for joining us for this second part of our physical educators' use of social media for professional development session. We've still got a couple more phys ed sessions, phys ed summit sessions coming up before our day is at a close. And just a reminder that within the Tassel there is a link to Flipgrid in case you would like to reflect upon it and have a possible chance of winning a subscription to Flipgrid. Also, if you go to the Phys Edagogy website and go to the Phys Ed Summit page, you can click on a link for a certificate of participation in case you need that for your professional development hours. So thanks again for joining us. And Collin and Jeff and Mel and Seth and Stephen, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.